Hi everybody. Tonight we're going to look at my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank for a few minutes. I'm actually going to throw some broken up pieces of algae wafer in there, and that should get my zebra loaches down on the bottom coming out and a little more active, so you might get a better look at them. But what we're going to talk about tonight is nitrates and nitrate test kits. We're going to go look at two different type of nitrate test kits, and we are going to look at the difference between them and why I use one sometimes and another one other times, and why on some occasions, like today, I use both. The one I use most often is the API test kit that most people are familiar with. It's a simple glass vial. You put 5 ml of tank water in it, you put 10 drops of your first reagent, and then after shaking vigorously you put 10 drops of your second reagent in it. Shake the vial for 1 minute, and then you wait 5 and you get your test results. The problem I run into with the API test kit is when you start getting up towards 40 parts per million, the color starts shifting out of the sort of brownish orange coloration and into red. And for me, and I don't know whether this is my color perception or what, but I have a very difficult time distinguishing shades of red. Now, it's also partly responsible is the test itself, because you jump from 40 parts per million to 80 parts per million. It's not subtle. You know, you don't get a lot of graduation from 40 parts to 80 parts per million. I do have another test kit, however, that is very specific. Now, it only goes up to 50 parts per million, but I find that every time I think I'm off the charts with the API test kit and I use this other test kit, I've never gone over 50 parts per million using that test. So when I tested the water today in this tank, it's been about a week since I did a water change, and this is one of those tanks that I don't really do water changes very often on, and I generally don't concern myself with the nitrates getting up around 40-50 parts per million. I just don't worry about that. In my experience, it's just not that critical in most cases. There are some fish that are extremely sensitive to nitrates, but not all, and in fact, in my experience, quite a lot of them are not that hypersensitive to nitrates that I don't worry too much about it. If you are getting up into the red on the API test kit, it's time to do a water change, but it's not time to panic and do a water change. Simply get to it in a reasonable amount of time when you can get to it. It's not like you're dealing with ammonia in your tank or nitrates in your tank. Those are the things that you need to stop what you're doing and do a water change. If you test your water and you've got 40 parts per million nitrates, do a water change when you can get to it within a reasonable amount of time, but you don't have to panic. And that's where I am now. I'm not actually going to do the water change tonight, but we are going to talk about the test kits, and that's why I wanted to look at this tank in particular. When I tested it today, the test came out red, but I kind of want to see a little bit of brownish orange left in there. So in this particular case, where for whatever reason I am looking for a very specific number and not this sort of general number that I get from the API test kit, I use my CChem test kit, which actually has a different gradient scale, and it's much easier to tell exactly how many parts per million nitrates you have. So we are going to go over and look at my test station, and we are going to go do these tests on camera, and I'm going to show you how to actually do the tests and how to read them properly, etc. So the rest of this video is probably going to be a little less visually stimulating, but it should be a little more informative. So let's go over and take a look at all of my different testing stuff. Alright everybody, here we are. So we should all be familiar with these little glass vials. Make sure I'm in camera here. When you fill it up to the 5 ml line, if you want the most accurate test possible, you will notice when the water sits in the vial there will be a little bit of a cup shape to the line of water. You want the bottom of that cup to be where the line is on the vial, and that will be 5 ml exactly. So what we do is we simply take the first bottle, we add 10 drops, you then mix this a little. You can shake it vigorously, you can roll it over once or twice, 3 times. You just want to make sure everything in there is nice and mixed up. The very important part of this step is on bottle number 2, you need to vigorously shake it. Now, I've already done this before we started the video, so I don't have to do this for the full 30 seconds, but you really do want to shake this very vigorously for quite a while, and if it's been sitting on the shelf, you want to do it for even longer. So we do 10 drops of that. If you notice any clogging or sticking then the mix was not shaken enough. There are dissolved solids, or they're suspended solids rather, in that solution, and you need to mix them thoroughly and evenly. Once you've put your 10 drops of your second bottle in, you then need to continue doing this for 1 more minute and keep everything suspended in that solution. The easiest way to do it is simply count every time you go over and back as 1, 2, 3, and simply do that about 50 or 60 times, and that will be your 1 minute of keeping everything moving. Now normally, as you can probably already tell, we're starting to get some color change. You need to just continue doing this for about a minute. I find that if you don't do it for a full minute, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. These tests aren't that hypercritical. But you do need to keep it moving in solution for a little while, at least 40-50 times of doing this, and then you will wind up getting your accurate result. So I don't know if that's been a minute or not, but I feel like I've been talking for quite a while. It's probably only been 20 seconds, but we're going to call that good. That needs to sit for 5 more minutes. It's also important to note that after that 5 minutes, that color will continue changing, so it's important to check at the 5-minute mark. So while we're waiting for that to bloom, I will show you how to do this Seachem test kit. First of all, we get a multi-cavity tray. You can do 6 tests at once. You also have your nitrite reagent, which is the first bottle you will be using. Your second nitrate reagent is actually a powder, which we'll be looking at in a moment. You get a little spoon to scoop up your powder, and then you get your little gradient color card that you can match your color of both the nitrite and the nitrate solutions. So all you do is you pull 1 pipette full up to where the bulb starts, and then you empty it into a cup. You do that a second time and fill that cup up. You do 1 drop of your first reagent, and now that needs to sit for 3 minutes to allow those colors to bloom. If I want to skip the nitrite test, which we're going to do, I would then just go ahead and add the nitrate. If you do want to find out your nitrite level, you simply let that bloom for 3 minutes and then you check it, and you can get your nitrite reading. Now, if you can tell on camera, we are getting a little tiny color change. I've said before and I'll say again, you are going to have some level of nitrites in your tank. You are going to have some trace amounts of ammonia in your tank. They are being produced in your tank, so therefore they have to be in your tank. This is a very, very sensitive test. It goes down to 2 points past the decimal point, and that's about where that little pink color comes out, at about 0.01 part per million. So to do the nitrate test, we simply take 1 level spoonful, we mix that in, give it a little stir with the back of the spoon, and now that needs to bloom for 3 more minutes. And in that time, this will be done as well, so we'll be able to check both tests at the same time. So I'm going to go set a timer, you are going to sit tight, and we'll be right back in 3 minutes. Alright, and here we are 3 minutes later. Now we're going to look at the API test kit first, because when we look at that test, we are going to do a bird's eye straight down on it. So for this test, we're going to start by looking at this color valve. Now I do have a light on in front of us and behind us, so this should be as well lit as possible. But if you kind of see what I mean, we go from 40 parts per million at this shade of red all the way to 80 parts per million at that shade of red. That's not a lot of room for fine tuning, and it just more or less gives me the idea of once you see this vial turning this sort of reddish color, it's time to do a water change. It's as simple as that. You don't need to be critical about it. In this particular case, and for the purposes of this video, I did want to shoot a test showing you both kits and doing a comparison to them. Now I know this may look very dark to you at the moment, but I'm going to reposition the camera real quickly and we will be right back, and we are going to look at this test and how to read it, and that will give us an exact number of our nitrates. Alright, let's see if I can do this without screaming in your ear. This is the color card, and if you will notice, it has nitrites and nitrates, and if you will also notice, it gets down to a very, very light shade of pink. And if you're looking at your nitrites, my shade was down here around 0.01 parts per million. But when we get up into the nitrates, that is going to be a much darker color. I'm having a really hard time doing this in front of the camera while I'm trying to look at what I'm doing at the same time. I'm sorry about that. The thing I like about this test is you don't necessarily pay attention to the actual number that it's displaying until you are done. So what I do is just hold it next to it and just slide it back and forth until my eye sort of picks up where I think it feels about right, and to me that looks about right there. And then when I go down and check the card, you can actually see there's no number designation right there. So if we pull it just a little that way, you can see the 40. So we're sitting just under 40. Now that coincides with what this vial says, which you get a little better color there. You can see it still has just a little bit of that orange, and it's not fully red yet. So I do this from time to time just for my own purposes, so I now have a better idea of what this API test kit looks like when it's about 38 parts per million. And that way I don't have to say, well, it's just red, I don't know what color, I don't know exactly what it is, it's just red. So I really do like this Seachem test kit. It's a little more labor intensive, I guess you could say. There's a little more steps to it, etc. But you do get a much more accurate test reading, and every single test gives you both a nitrite and a nitrate test, which is always handy as well. So there you go. This tank is not ready for a water change yet because that level of nitrates does not concern me one little bit. We'll give it another week and we will see what it looks like then. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you real soon on the next one.